Okay, and I just got the message that we're officially recording. So thank you all for being here. Welcome. I am Katie Thompson, the Senior Volunteer Recruitment Specialist for the American Red Cross Central Appalachia region. And West Virginia University is a part of our Allegheny Highlands chapter of our region. And we are thrilled to have you all on here and overwhelmed by the response. So thank you for raising your hand and saying, I want to learn more. And hopefully you'll learn some more about how you can serve with the American Red Cross. So today we're going to be talking about how you can really get real life, hands-on experience of the Red Cross mission by deploying during a disaster. And we'll start with this quote from Mr. Rogers. You may have heard it before, and some of you all are young, so you might not even know Mr. Rogers. But he had a show back in the day, and one of the quotes that he said on the show was, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" And he says that was something that calmed him when he was scared and would see those things happening. And here at the Red Cross, if you're a Red Cross volunteer, you'll probably be that helper in the background that Mr. Rogers is referring to. If you watch the news and see all the things that are going on, there's always helpers that are there, and the Red Cross is a big part of that. So we hope that you will become one of the helpers. And our purpose today, we're hoping to communicate the American Red Cross mission and our fundamental principles, provide information on the 2021 hurricane and wildfire seasons and why it's so important to be ready when needed. We're hoping to give information on opportunities to help at large-scale disasters, answer any questions about volunteering with the Red Cross during disasters, reviewing the School of Social Work requirements to deploy with the Red Cross, and then also maybe provide some local options if you find that deployment doesn't work for you, and then help you get started on your Red Cross journey. And just a few housekeeping things, just making sure that your computer or phone is on mute. It does help to eliminate any background noise. Feel free to utilize the chat for any questions or comments during the presentation. We'll have an end Q&A session as well, but feel free to put in the chat too. Everyone can come off mute at the end of the presentation for the Q&A, and we'll stay and answer all your questions. And most importantly, it is lunchtime, so if you're hungry or thirsty, go ahead and help yourself to a snack or a cold drink and get comfortable. So our mission at the Red Cross is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. And at the Red Cross, in order to fulfill that mission, we have 7 fundamental principles that guide us. They are humanity. The Red Cross is here to meet a person's basic human needs when they need it the most. Impartiality, we're here to help anyone and everyone. Neutrality, we do not choose sides. The American Red Cross was born on the battlefield during the Civil War by Nurse Clara Barton. And no matter which side of the Civil War you were fighting on, the Red Cross was there to help. And that principle is one that we abide by to this day. Independence, we are a nonprofit organization. We are not government funded. Voluntary service, 90% of the people that work for the Red Cross are volunteers. Unity, there can only be one Red Cross or one Red Crescent Society in any country. And universality, the Red Cross comes together all across the world to restore humanity and provide relief. And 2 of the fundamental principles on here, which will guide you a lot, I believe, if you do deploy, are the impartiality and neutrality. When you're on a disaster relief operation and deployed, we help anyone and everyone who needs it, and no matter what your status is, our shelters are open to any and all. So here we have a quote. This lovely lady is the president of the American Red Cross. And back in July of last year, when hurricane season was gearing up, COVID was running wild, she set out a quote, and she said, "We are here for a singular purpose, to alleviate suffering. Red Crossers are humanitarians who see a need, and they in turn need to fill it. This is our culture, which has stood the test of time since Clara Barton founded our beloved organization, and we have the culture in place to make a difference. And in fact, we do that every day. As I've often said, the American Red Cross is a beacon of hope." So that quote at that time was just a reminder, through all the trials and tribulations that were happening, the American Red Cross is there to be that beacon of hope through all those things. And now I'll quit talking and turn it over to our Disaster Workforce Engagement Manager, long title, for Miss Jennifer Jett Prescott. She specializes in deployment, training, and volunteer support. And she is going to talk to you all about, first and foremost, the 2021 hurricane and wildfire season.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today to discuss our need for caseworkers and what national deployment is like after a disaster. The first thing I want to do is share with you some facts about the 2021 hurricane and wildfire seasons. The first thing you should know is that hurricane season generally runs from June 1 to November 30th, and peak season begins on August 15th. So we are very much in peak hurricane season. Wildfire season, on the other hand, doesn't have an official start and end date. Some sources say the first fire of 2021 started on January 14th, and we have been in a continuous state of wildfire season ever since then. The 2020 hurricane season was a long, exhausting, busy season, and it was predicted in January that the 2021 season would be just as busy, if not busier, than 2020. Already in 2021, we have seen 12 tropical storms and 7 hurricanes in the Atlantic, and we still have 6 weeks of hurricane season left. Our last named storm was Victor, and the next storm will be named Wanda. Any storms after Wanda will require that we go to a backup list of names because we've already made it through the alphabet. And so the alphabet would start over, and that next storm would be named Adria. Hurricane Ida, a Category 4 hurricane, made impact on August 30th in Louisiana, and relief and recovery efforts by the Red Cross began at that point and will continue until at least Thanksgiving of this year. Right now, we have volunteers on the ground in Louisiana doing sheltering, feeding, health and mental health services, disaster assessment, and recovery casework in order to provide disaster clients with items to meet their daily needs while we help them on the path to a new normal. It was also predicted at the start of the year that the 2021 wildfire season would be as busy, if not busier, than the 2020 season. As of October 13th, there had been a total of 47,201 wildfires across the country this calendar year. We have had volunteers in Oregon, Washington State, and California supporting evacuation shelters, providing meals and supplies, and offering recovery casework to help victims get back on their feet after having to evacuate their homes due to fire danger. Next slide, please. Okay, now I want to touch on what a disaster relief operation is and why it's important to disaster victims. A disaster relief operation is an operation the American Red Cross stands up in order to respond to a disaster. Disaster relief operations, also known as DROs, occur all over the country when incidents like flooding, tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, multifamily fires, explosions, train derailments, environmental accidents, and all kinds of other disasters occur. DROs focus on meeting the urgent disaster-caused needs of the folks who live in the impacted communities, like sheltering, meals, health and mental health services, distribution of emergency supplies and cleaning supplies, and recovery casework to provide resources to help those folks get back on their feet and get to what we call the new normal. In February 2021, we had 3 simultaneous disaster relief operations in our region, Central Appalachia region alone, and those were due to winter storms, flooding, and an apartment complex fire that all happened within like 2 weeks of each other. We had volunteers who supported the disaster relief operations locally by providing disaster assessment, health and mental health support, and recovery casework. And I think, as you can see, I keep referring to recovery casework because it is one of the most urgent positions that we need to fill on a DRO, and we always have need for that. Many of our volunteers prefer to support operations like these within our region, while others like to travel the country and support operations in other regions. And this is what we call national deployment. I'm going to turn off my camera because I have a network warning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, Jen.
Oh, okay, thank you. So this is what we call national deployment, and these deployment assignments are 14-day assignments in which volunteers are generally on the ground in the impacted community providing in-person service. Sometimes we also have virtual deployment opportunities where the work is done from a computer in your home. This year, Central Appalachia region alone has had volunteers in California, Washington, Oregon, Texas, Louisiana, Wisconsin, Mississippi, Michigan, DC, Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Florida. We have had volunteers travel pre-landfall to Louisiana and Mississippi to help set up evacuation shelters before Hurricane Ida hit, and we have had volunteers travel to impacted communities 24 hours after impact. In the midst of a worldwide pandemic, our volunteers bravely rushed to impacted communities to provide help and hope to disaster victims. Next slide, please. As a recovery caseworker on the ground, you may work in a shelter or in a remote location to meet with clients to assess their needs and offer resources. Shelters are where clients stay when they have nowhere else to go, and they stay until new living arrangements can be made. If you are stationed in a shelter, you will meet with clients one-on-one to discuss their needs, offer resources, and contribute to the process of shelter resident transition, which is helping them get to a new normal by guiding them in the process of moving out of the shelter and into more permanent housing. Since you may be working in a shelter, or you may have an interest to deploy as a shelter worker, I want to talk for a minute about what it's like to work in a shelter. Shelter workers are boots on the ground before, during, and after a disaster, and they support the day-to-day activities in reception, registration, feeding, lodging, and providing compassionate customer service to shelter clients while observing our COVID safety protocols. Shelter workers need to be able to build relationships with co-workers and shelter residents, have strong written and verbal communication skills, be physically able to stand and or walk for extended periods of time, including climbing stairs, and be able to lift and or transport supplies up to 20 pounds multiple times per shift. As with casework, shelter shifts are generally 12 hours and can be a day shift or night shift. As with casework, there are shelter-specific trainings that must be completed before a volunteer can deploy in sheltering. Sheltering and casework, as I mentioned, are 2 of the most urgent needs of DROs, so there are continuous opportunities to deploy in both. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to introduce you to our Regional Disaster Officer, Joanna King, who just returned this week from a lengthy deployment in Louisiana, where she served as the Recovery Casework Chief for Hurricane Ida disaster relief. Joanna is going to talk to you about what an in-person deployment and casework will look like.
Thank you, Jen. I do want to talk just a moment about Hurricane Ida. Hurricane Ida hit on August 29th, as most of you know. It took us about 4 weeks to really start recovery casework for a variety of reasons. People in shelters, unable to return home. Many people had evacuated out of the state and were unable to get back. We had people who still did not have power. Still did not have homes, and they still did not have water. So it takes a little while to begin recovery casework. As Jen mentioned, we do start it immediately, but to really impact those out in the community, it takes a little bit of time. I came onto the job about 4 weeks after, and I deployed for 3 weeks. Typical deployment, as Jen mentions, is 14 days. I did extend to stay a little bit longer because I really had the desire to make sure that the program was moving, going steady, and that everybody knew what their job was going to be moving forward so it would continue to flow. After about 3 weeks, we helped 10,000 people decide what their next steps for recovery were going to be, and we gave about 10,000 people financial assistance. That equates to 1.7 million plus in the hands of the people of Louisiana, direct financial assistance to help them fix their home, move into a new home, replace clothing, food, anything that they need within their home to get to that recovery situation. That's what they could use that money for. In addition to money, we provide referrals to local agencies that can also help replace items, who can help repair homes, and who can help them if they decide that relocation is what's best for them. The last thing that we do when we're talking through recovery planning, in addition to referrals, is we talk to the families about what their situation is going to look like in the future. Is this the right place for them? How are they going to repair what is typically family-owned homes with no mortgage and very few people having insurance? For those that do, we may advocate on their behalf by having conversations with insurance companies or government partners to make sure that they can replace documents and the critical information that they have to replace their homes. The recovery process will continue through November. So as I said, I came in for 4 weeks after the hurricane hit, and I stayed for 3. And we're looking at several more weeks that our team will be on the ground, supporting people in person. What does recovery in person look like? It includes going out into the field to see people in their communities at places like town halls, or setting up events in a local Lions Club office or in a local community center, seeing families one by one, getting their case information, putting it into the system, providing them financial assistance immediately, and then following up several days later to make sure that they have the continued recovery needs. For those of you who are interested in in-person deployment, it's very heartwarming. The compassion, the tears in the eyes of the person that you're helping at the other side of the table, it will really change your life. We can't give hugs right now because of COVID, obviously. And as you can see on the pictures, we wear our masks and we sit socially distanced, but the amount of compassion that you're providing to that person that's sitting on the other side of the table from you cannot be understated or overstated. For those of you who are interested in helping but can't necessarily do an in-person deployment, that's okay. There are virtual casework options where you can give a call to somebody to ask them about how they're doing and what their plans are and help them find the resources that they need. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amber.
Thank you, Joe. Like she said, I'm Amber Dean. I'm the Disaster Program Specialist of the Tri-State Chapter. So like I put in the chat, my main office is actually in Huntington, West Virginia. But we work a lot with casework overall, both local and on DROs, or the disaster relief operations. And I have gotten to deploy twice now with virtual DROs in casework. So that it does look a little bit different than what Joanna was just mentioning. It's still very much the same type of work. You know, you're still making that reach out, doing intakes with clients, providing referrals and working with other agencies, but it's all virtual. So a lot of phone calls, Zoom, or, you know, WebEx, whatever is required on that particular DRO. And that's something that you would find out, you know, sort of the day of, which is why, if you noticed on the previous slide, it does kind of say, you know, you have to be flexible, basically. Changing environment is, thank you. Yeah, changing environment is absolutely a big thing, even in a virtual setting. You may think that on one day you're doing all intakes, because that is a big part of it, and they might need you for something else on that particular day instead. So being able to kind of switch between things, switch priorities as things change on that DRO is a big part of it. Either way, though, it's all it's all really good work, and I think it's very good work for social workers in particular, especially when you're doing the intakes. You're doing client interviews to intake them into the system. So, gathering that basic demographic information is a huge part of it, but you'll also usually get a bit of a story from them too. A lot of people are still processing the situation and are still, obviously having a lot of feelings and are not sure what their next steps are, what they should be doing. So having somebody that has a bit of training, like a social work student or somebody with a degree in social work, is really awesome because you have that care and compassion. You have that ability to work with people, meet them on their level, and try to work through people that might be having a really terrible day. So I think it's really great work, and it's really rewarding even on a virtual level. It might not be the same, and like Joe said, we can't be given hugs, but it is really, really nice to be able to work through that case and get somebody to a point where, maybe when they're first talking to you at intake, they have no idea what they're doing, no idea how they're going to get any assistance. And you can walk them through that initial interview, gather their demographic information, put that into our web-based system, and get them some financial assistance if they qualify. A lot of our clients on those bigger operations do. So usually we can do some financial assistance, and then we have other services available as well. So we have mental health, health services. We have spiritual care workers, and we can make those referrals depending on what those clients' needs are. And then, of course, the recovery planning services at sort of the back end. We can make referrals for those services, and that's part of what we do as caseworkers on a DRO as well. Is if you're not doing intake calls and doing those interviews with clients, you're doing some follow-up calls to check back in with them, see how they're doing, see where they're at in their recovery from the event, and seeing what you can do, who you can connect them with to help them through those next steps. And what I've found is most always you're going to have a list already ready for you that they will have put together on these larger DROs, these larger operations. They already know of certain agencies that are willing to help our clients and are able to work with them pretty quickly. So there is at least a starter list for you almost always, but then it's sort of just working through with those clients what their needs are, and just reaching out to other agencies or searching through our databases to see what else there might be available for them that we can link them with. So either way, whether you're doing the front end intake or the back end, the recovery casework part, it's very, very rewarding, even in a virtual setting. And I really hope that you all consider it, because I think it's perfect for social workers, especially. So that I think is all on my portion, and I think that I am passing over to Jennifer Jett Prescott again to discuss a little bit more about those DROs and more of what you can expect.
Okay, I'm going to try my camera again. So I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about what you need to know if you are interested in deploying to a national DRO, or even, this is more applicable to if you're leaving our region and going to another division or somewhere else like California. So as the Disaster Workforce Engagement Manager, I oversee our region's deployments by making sure our volunteers are trained for positions that will be needed on the DROs, whether those are local, virtual, or national operations. I make sure the volunteers have set their availability so that if assignments are available, we can quickly identify them and get them on the road. And my team also helps educate volunteers on what deployment is and how it works, so we can help ensure a satisfactory experience for our volunteers. So the first thing I want to point out is our COVID safety protocols. As you're aware, we've been dealing with a worldwide pandemic for a year and a half now. The pandemic has directly impacted the safety measures we take with regard to our workforce, because our workforce safety is always our number one priority. As a result, masks must be worn at all times on a DRO, regardless of what job the volunteer is doing. Volunteers must follow CDC, which stands for Cover, Distance, Clean. The cover refers to wearing the mask. The distance refers to keeping a 6-foot distance from others, and clean refers to washing your hands regularly, using hand sanitizer when water and soap are not available, and being mindful of sanitization in public areas as needed. As of today, volunteers will need to be fully vaccinated in order to deploy in person. The Red Cross definition of full vaccination is that an individual is fully vaccinated 2 weeks after receiving the 1-dose vaccine by Johnson & Johnson, or 2 weeks after receiving the 2nd dose of Moderna or Pfizer. If you are interested in deployment, you should know that generally you will get 24 hours notice for an assignment. This means a member of the disaster workforce engagement team will call you and ask you if you can leave the next day. This is why setting your availability on your profile is important. It tells me you're prepared to go with 1 day's notice, and it helps you know when to have your bag packed and ready to go in case you get the call. Deployments generally last 14 days, and that usually includes travel to and from the DRO. Daily shifts on an operation are generally 12 hours, but may run longer depending on the need and what's happening. When you are accepting an assignment, you are committing to stay the full 14 days. So before you accept, you need to make sure you are available to be gone from home for the full 14 days. You also need to have a current valid driver's license in order to be able to deploy. This is because we may ask you to pick up a rental car to get you from the airport to the operation, or you may be asked to use a vehicle on the operation to deliver mission critical work. The Red Cross is responsible for making your travel arrangements and taking care of the cost of travel. We have a travel agency we work with to move our volunteers around the country. The Red Cross will cover expenses like Uber or taxi costs to get you to and from an airport to the operation and home. Meals, if meals are not provided during your shift, baggage check fees, and other necessities like that. Volunteers who deploy should, at this point, expect to stay in a staff shelter. Generally, this is a large room with cots similar to a client shelter, but the staff is kept separate from the clients who come in. When you deploy, it's very important that you remember to be kind, both with clients and other volunteers. Both are likely experiencing exhaustion and have been impacted emotionally from the disaster and its aftermath. Sometimes you will have volunteers on a DRO who were personally impacted by the disaster, but still feel the need to go out and help others, even though, their home life has been turned upside down due to the disaster. We never know what other people are going through, so it's important to just always remember to be kind and compassionate. It's also important to remember to be patient and flexible. DROs are very fluid and constantly changing. You may be moved around from shelter to shelter a few times for your lodging as the DRO evolves. Your supervisor may change a couple of times. You may be sent to a different town within the DRO's area to work. You may even be asked to do tasks that don't fall in line with the job in which you were assigned to do. We are all in this together, and it's important to just go with the flow and get to yes. When you deploy, it's important that you remember to take care of yourself as well as the clients. Make sure you're eating regular meals and getting rest. These are long days and can be stressful. You should get 1 day off during your deployment, and you can use this to rest, do laundry, or even do some sightseeing depending on where you are. You'll also have access to staff services on the DRO who can help you with any issues you have, as well as access to disaster mental health and health services volunteers in case you have needs in those areas. You can always call your home region for support if something comes up and you don't know how to deal with it. When you deploy, we want you to represent the Red Cross professionally and impartially. We ask volunteers to leave their personal opinions about things like religion and politics and cultural differences at home. Volunteers deploy to help all, and that is what the focus should be. When your assignment on a DRO is complete, you'll out-process with the DRO before you come home. And when you get home, Disaster Workforce Engagement will do a post-deployment interview with you to debrief you on your experience, answer any questions you have, and address any concerns that came up with your assignment. I know this is a lot of information and it can seem overwhelming. The good news is that if you decide to move forward and deploy with the Red Cross, I'll be here to answer your questions. When you complete your training, I'll call you to walk you through the deployment process again, and we can go over any questions or concerns you have. And I also have several new documents like what to expect before, during, and after a deployment that I can share with you that I think will be really helpful.
Thank you so much, Jen. And now we'll turn it over to Jennifer to talk about or Tina to talk about the requirements from the School of Social Work. And I'll just turn it over.
Sure. So it's really great to be here, and I'm just so excited that there are students that are interested in this opportunity. I think it's really tremendous. My name is Jenny Gamble. I'm the Director of Field Education for WVU School of Social Work. So, first and foremost, we look to students to represent the school and WVU well, and to follow all of the great guidelines that were just reviewed, especially being adaptable and flexible and patient and kind. We know that in emergencies and in disasters, folks' worlds have been turned upside down. And so it's important to, operate with empathy and compassion and to, follow the Red Cross as they need you to, wherever they need you to be. We have worked with all of our instructors at the School of Social Work and notifying them that you are being deployed. All absences will be considered excused. And so students who would need to miss class for their deployment and for this work would have the opportunity to make up and turn in any assignments. The classes that they miss would not be counted against them in their grades. And so just kind of keeping that in mind, that we're really encouraging this and excited, and will help students with their coursework and however that needs to fold into the deployment. Students will be set up in tracking their time in Tavera. Now, this is the field education, the online field management system that we currently use. We consider this to be an enhanced field experience. And so you would have a listing in Tavera. Basically, the American Red Cross would be listed as a site, and you would be able to count your hours that you're working against that. We anticipate this being around 128 hours that a student would be able to log and practice these skills and competencies that they are developing in the field. We were not expecting to or anticipating counting travel days. That is up for discussion, I think, depending on how that travel time is being used, if there's materials and prep work and things like that happening. But just kind of we're being open to that as we step into this experience with students. In addition to recording time in Tavera, which could be happening all along the way, which is what we encourage, or at the end of the experience, we will ask students to complete a competency reflection assignment. And this, again, would be submitted through Tavera. This will not be an onerous activity, but a short reflection that walks through the different competencies that you felt like you developed in this experience, and what that looked like, and how was that for you. So just something to give more color to your experience as we are coming to understand all the things that you have learned in this. And then this last bullet relates to that second option up there, the second bullet up there, around informing your instructors, making sure that they know when you're going to be gone, so that they can count on your tests, so they can make arrangements for any tests or assignments to be coordinated after the fact. So I think that I'm happy to answer any questions, or I think that maybe we're leaving those towards the end. But in terms of the School of Social Work, we're very excited about this, and really are hopeful that students would be able to take advantage of it. I'm not sure who I'm kicking it back to.
I think it's my turn. Thank you so much for elaborating on those bullet points. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your support of students doing this kind of volunteer work. And so just want to briefly mention, yes, today we've talked a lot about disaster recovery casework, national deployments, virtual deployments. The Red Cross actually has 5 lines of service, disaster cycle services being one of them, and what we talked about most of the time today. But in addition to the sort of large scale disaster response, every day, volunteers are responding to local disasters, mainly home fires within our region. So that could be an opportunity for you all to give back and help others as well, is with local response right here, helping your neighbors in your backyard. Blood services, which most people know about the Red Cross. We collect blood and need people to help out at blood drives as blood donor ambassadors. They check in blood donors, they help them afterwards, get refreshments, make sure that they're okay. And we actually have a great need for blood drive volunteers in the Morgantown area specifically. And finally, I'll just touch on volunteer services, which is what I do. Recruitment, engagement, and recognition. So we have a need for anyone and everyone to help us get the word out, tell the Red Cross story, encourage others to become a Red Cross volunteer. And then once people become Red Cross volunteers, making sure they're engaged and having a wonderful experience. And that's what volunteer services does. So next steps, if we haven't scared you away yet, you can become a Red Cross volunteer in this capacity. I will be sharing a link with your professors that you can click on and begin your Red Cross volunteer application. And that is the first step, is to complete that volunteer application. Once that application is done, and I'll move on to the roadmap there, once you complete your volunteer application and it's approved, a volunteer screener will be in touch with you. That's another part of volunteer services. We have those conversations with you around your availability, what you're interested in, and hook you up and link you up with the right department and line of service. Depending on what that is, you'll begin your training. The training is required. It is self-paced. It is online. For a disaster recovery casework, that training can be up to 10 hours. It's a lot, but it's a way to hopefully make you feel empowered and ready and knowledgeable to be able to go on a deployment, while also remaining completely flexible and knowing that things could change at any moment. And then the deployment in process, and then which is what we've talked about, the bulk of this presentation, and then the out process, which Jen talked about, the evaluation and feedback and follow-up. And I think this is perfect timing because we just got a question in the chat to really open it up to any and all questions that you all might have. I see one on there that says, does the training count towards any field hours? And I guess I'll defer to Jennifer.
Yes, we would absolutely include the training time as part of the full experience.
Thank you. And Joanna had mentioned that in terms of the travel, and if that would count towards hours too, she says that sometimes immediately upon arrival, you'll check in and get to work. So that might be a factor in deciding about travel being a part of those hours as well.
Yeah, we're open to, I mean, I think that if it's, jumping on a plane and that kind of thing, a day of travel, we're open to potentially including that if that, depending on how that person spends that time. We really are kind of operating on the honor system. We know that shoring up your strength and mustering your courage to go into this kind of space is an emotional process as well. And coming back from an experience, and even though there's the out processing once you're back, coming back from this experience may be exactly the right time to document, to kind of develop that competency reflection. So we are very open to that. This is the first time we're doing this, so we want to hear how it goes, and are really approaching this with flexibility and appreciation for the service that students would be doing. Are there other questions?
Does anybody have questions about the deployment or being boots on the ground, or any of our COVID safety protocols or anything like that?
Is there an application deadline?
In terms of a deadline, no. The application process can take up to a week to complete. It's all done online. It's a lot of, agreeing to policies. There is a background check involved, as you might have read on the some of the slides. All of our Red Cross volunteers do need to pass a background check. So that can take up to a week. And then after your application is approved, that's when we start the screening and getting you placed appropriately and then starting your training. So no hard deadline on getting that application in from our perspective. Maybe from the School of Social Work, they might have some deadlines in terms of, when holiday breaks are, when's the best time for students to take this time to deploy, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think that make sure my thing's on. I think that we certainly think that the holiday breaks are opportune times to do this. As an enhanced field experience, we would not be developing a learning contract, and we would not be engaging in formal assessment processes with this. So the more traditional field placement, whether that's generalist or advanced, those are going to continue to be the same, and you have a learning contract and work that has been planned. So in addition to your instructors, we certainly would want to help work with you and help talk through any implications that may have to your current placement, and making sure that your current placement agency or field placement site is okay with you taking that time, and nothing like that would negatively impact you. So the field office is here to help, and we look at this as something that someone could do during their current field placement, but also contribute to their upcoming field placement. So if someone was going to be doing their advanced placement in the fall and the spring, maybe it's that summertime before would be a good time to do this. So this is this is the first time we've done it, so we're definitely going to be paying attention to any stumbling blocks, and we're going to be communicating a lot, but we really want to work with students and hope that we can make this work for them.
Thank you. And yes, one of the challenges, many challenges, but you can't predict disasters and when they're going to occur. So staying, again, the F word, staying flexible within timeframes and knowing that things could happen at any moment, that could cause maybe a bigger sense of urgency to say, hey, let's get this application in, let's get your training done. This hurricane has just hit, this wildfire is happening, this tornado, et cetera. So we kind of are at the whim of Mother Nature sometimes in our timelines.
And I can tell you guys, I know I had mentioned that hurricane season ends, November 30th, technically. Last year was January, a year ago was when I started my job, and I was under the impression that, from December to June, we would have downtime for preparation. Disaster season did not stop. Like I mentioned, we had 3 local DRs alone, in February and March, and it's always, flooding, winter storms, anything that can put people out of their housing, cause damage to, where they live, put people in need. Tornadoes, the flash flooding in Tennessee a couple of months ago, we had volunteers go down there. We had deployed some people, I think it was early in the year, up north. It might have been DC area for one DR, and then they switched over because there was an explosion in Baltimore. So it literally is not just hurricane season, it's all the time. I just wanted to clarify that in case I made it sound like it's only until November 30th. It's an ongoing need.
If you're local to the area where there's an operation, can you go home and come back every day, or do they like everyone to stay in one spot?
I can answer that. If you're local to the area and you live there, you can absolutely go home every day. In fact, it's encouraged because we are working on the donated dollar, and it's very expensive to pay for hotels. It's very expensive to pay for staff shelters. So if you're able to go home every day, that is encouraged. If you're impacted by the disaster yourself, we will make sure that you are emotionally okay and in a good place to support, but a lot of people still do support locally, even though they are impacted.
And how long can you be a volunteer? Is it the sort of a you deploy once kind of thing, or is it potential to deploy multiple times?
We have had volunteers who have been volunteers for like 20, 30 years. As long as you are willing, to be a volunteer and you have the availability to deploy, we would love to have you. So we have some people who can do one deployment a year. I have a few volunteers who literally deploy, will come home for a week to rest up, and if there's another opportunity, they will go right back out because they are so driven by wanting to help people in need that's how they spend, a lot of the months of the year is on the road. We do try to keep in consideration, their health, making sure that they are getting enough rest in between DRs because it's exhausting, physically and mentally and emotionally. But as long as they are willing to go in good health, not having any problems, we try to accommodate the volunteer based on what they want their involvement to be. So yes, if you want to go like all summer, like we can do that.
That brings up just a comment that I'll make. We would, at the School of Social Work, we would be looking to include only one deployment because of the assessment process that we are required to for our accreditation. Depending on the placement that students are entering into, whether it's their generalist or their advanced placement, this takes up a nice chunk of the time, and we still need to work with each student on a learning contract and the assessment pieces for our accreditation and for your accreditation. So that is something just to keep in mind. You could do this all summer, absolutely, but we would ask that only one of those experiences be included as an enhanced field experience.
And if it was a matter that, you wanted to do multiple deployments and you could work it into your schedule, but you can't, like if you have the hours, but you can't be gone from home, we do have virtual deployments where you can help out for a certain number of hours a day or as needed. They do still like for you to commit to 14 days for scheduling purposes for the DR. But that is something that you can do at home. And I'm finding more and more that they are not always 12-hour shifts, but they are more flexible because they understand that we have a dire need for caseworkers and not everybody can do 12 hours a day. So there are opportunities if you have your own time and you have, a certain number of hours a day that you would like to commit to something like that. That is certainly something that we could talk about and see what kind of opportunities exist for that. We also have, I know we touched on it for just a minute, but we also have a need for local. And generally we have caseworkers who might sign up for a shift one day a week, or on the weekend or something like that. And I think Pat is on here and Pat could probably talk more about that. But we have, we have deployment where we're responding to major disasters. But locally, we also respond to house fires. So if there is something that goes on locally, if we have a family whose house is burned down or has, smoke damage, fire damage, we can also do casework on that. And we need people who are able to do similar work for those one-off cases.
And I think that if there's a student who would be interested in doing their full placement with the Red Cross locally, we're very open to that. So just know that you've got the deployment kind of component that is more of this enhanced field experience. And then I think that we're also talking about, what would that look like for a student to spend their full placement working side by side in partnership with the Red Cross as that intern doing their generalist or advanced placement with them. So if this is of interest as, working side by side for a longer period, I think that's something that we are, really open to and interested in exploring as well. We need the student to let us know that they are interested in that.
I think it'd be a great field placement. I just saw a chat that says local casework is typically done in 2-hour shifts. Most people sign up for 1 or 2 shifts a week. Now, if we went that route, that doesn't get any field hours. Is that correct? Or is that more just sort of personal volunteer stuff?
I think that we would want to talk about where you are in your current field placement and like how this kind of folds in. We have to be very mindful of that assessment piece, and just that, you know, the hours that are, the time you spend in this activity is not something that we're going to be assessing fully. And so we really like to leave that no more than a third of your total time. But we definitely have students who maybe they're in a certain placement and they're just not able to get the kind of exposure to certain clients or experiences as they would want. And so kind of developing a bridge to another agency where they can, you know, where they can work, collaborate, contribute, learn, all of those things. You know, we do that with certain agencies and certain students now. So if you're finding that your placement is a bit challenging in terms of really building these muscles, then let's talk about it so that we can, you know, figure out, you know, what that formula could look like and how we could bring those experiences together.
Hi, everyone. This is Pat. I am the regional recovery manager, and I did want to just put in a plug for the local casework. You know, we do have all kinds of opportunities for volunteers to assist clients on a daily basis who have been impacted by flooding or fires locally. So if you, outside of your internship or your field placement, have a desire to help people on a continuing basis, we would be more than happy to have you as a volunteer in our recovery program. We're always looking for individuals who can connect and empathize with the clients who have experienced possibly the worst day of their lives. So I just wanted to put that plug in, and I'm a social worker and I enjoy so much having an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. So consider doing it on a ongoing basis locally if you want to. Thank you.
I just wanted to jump in and say, hello, Pat. You may not remember me, but we went to undergrad. I won't say how many years ago, but it's good to hear your voice again, and good that we're starting this partnership with the Red Cross.
Hey, Tina. Yes, I do remember you. We had some good times at West Virginia State.
So Katie, do you mind if I make one final comment and then I'm going to hop off? The opportunity to deploy in person not only gives you the chance to meet diverse clients in diverse situations in communities you may never visit in your life otherwise, but it also gives you the opportunity to meet Red Crossers, volunteers from around the country who give of their time, their talent, their passion, these hours that they won't get back, their sweat, and many, many tears. The networking opportunities here are completely out of this world. I enjoy as much meeting with the Red Crossers and hearing their stories and their excitement for what we do as I do meeting with the clients and making sure that they have what they need for their next step. So if you're considering this, yes, it's hard work. Yes, it's in places you probably would have never visited. You do get some time off. I would encourage you to take that time and go see places. I've been to Crater Lake in Oregon. I've been to the North California coast. I was just recently in New Orleans and got a chance to visit some of the museums there with some Red Crossers, and we got to eat the good food, and there were good laughs and good stories. So it's not just you're there to help somebody on their worst day, but you're also meeting people who love this job. They love this opportunity, and it is their best day that they get to help somebody. So I'm so excited that we have a team here that is maybe going to join us, and hopefully in the future even more. Thanks for the opportunity, guys.
Yes, thank you, Joanna. Those were perfect words. I'm not going to destroy them by saying anything else, but thank you. And if you all want, we can stay on. I'll stay on for a few minutes. I'll stop the recording, but I'll stay on for a few minutes if anyone has any questions. But other than that, thank you all for being here and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody, for all of your work on this.